Mid-game in Deadlock usually refers to the part of the game between 10 and 25 minutes. At 10 minutes, the Urn and mid-boss both spawn, which is the indicator that you've now entered the mid-game. This guide assumes you already know the basics of Deadlock. If you don't, check out my new video for the new player guide. In this video, my goal is simple. I want to educate you on all the options available to you during the mid-game, what your role might be based on your hero, but more importantly, I want to teach you how to think about the mid-game as a whole. So what are the underlying principles to the mid-game that separate, the good Deadlock players from the great Deadlock players? Let's start with the mid-game goals. In the mid-game, it's pretty simple. The main things you want to achieve as a team are the Urn, Walkers, and mid-boss. As for individual goals, you want to make sure you're gathering enough souls for your role. Now, we'll talk about roles a little bit later. I don't want you to concern yourself too much, but for example, if you're playing Wraith, you're going to want a lot of souls. If you're playing Page, maybe not so much. If you're below Ascendant, I would say that roles don't matter too much, and you should just try to get as many souls as you can for the most part, unless you're maybe playing a support hero, and even then, right, like people are so inefficient below those ranks that it doesn't matter so much. But Deadlock is a really flexible game, and lots of heroes can fulfill different roles, so don't over obsess with the idea of, oh, as this hero I should have low souls or high souls, etc. And just focus on the fundamentals that we'll talk about in a second, which I've titled The Pillars. Now, a few months ago, I made a video titled The 3 Pillars of Macro. Luckily for us, that video still stands today, and it'll be used as the basis for discussing the mid-game. Link to the video in the description if you want a more in-depth explanation, because I'm not going to go as in-depth as I did in that video, because that video was 40 plus minutes talking about concepts and showing in-game examples. And I would say that, a lot of players might not want to sit through that. So this video is going to be a shorter version. And if you want the full thing, you can click on the link in the description. Now, the 3 pillars are pretty simple. It's efficiency, pressure, and objectives. These are the fundamental building blocks for any player to have a good mid-game. Deadlock's a game that's won through a lot of small decisions adding up and making a massive difference over a long period of time. Let's start with the first one, efficiency. In order to be efficient, the most important thing is to understand the amount of souls that is obtained by different things on the map. If you're curious about this and you want to see it for yourself, check the in-game graphs and look at someone who is rich, then click on souls by source. It'll give you a great idea of what actually gives souls. Now, one thing we're not going to talk about in the efficiency is kills, which can give a lot of souls, but to me are more under pressure. Now, to make it easy for you guys, here's basically a brief list of what your order of priority should be. Waves are almost always the most important thing because one, they apply pressure, which we'll talk about later, but also they're usually the most souls on the map. If you just clear 2 waves every minute, that's 1,000 souls per minute, pretty much, if you clear the waves by yourself. Thinners are second when it comes to soul generation, not only because of the souls they give, but also because of the permanent buffs, which are very strong. After that, it's tier 3 camps, if your hero can clear them. So there's a bunch of heroes that can't clear tier 3 camps. If you can't, don't bother with them, but if you can, I would say they're below the sinners in terms of priority, but still very high. And then in fourth, I've got, boxes, and the rest of the jungle are about equal. Jungle is worth slightly more depending on when you are in the game, but boxes are much easier, right? So your hero might not be able to farm the jungle very effectively, in which case you might actually want to prioritize going for some box routes. Now, there is a quick little hidden tip there. Don't forget about the boxes underneath mid. Those boxes are actually worth more than a Sinner's on average. Now, it is a little bit RNG, but from pretty much every test I've done, I get more souls from them than I do from doing a Sinner's. So they're pretty important, and a lot of people don't clear them. So if people at your rank are not clearing them, make sure to do them. Applying this priority list is simple enough. There's an additional component to efficiency, which is to avoid going to areas that are already handled by teammates. For example, if I'm applying this list and I see a wave, naturally I should go to the wave even if there's a Sinners available, right? But what if my teammate is already clearing the wave? Well, in that situation, maybe I shouldn't go to the wave unless I think he needs help. Now that's where it gets a little nuanced, right? Sometimes your teammate might need help. Sometimes there might be fighting someone and you might want to go to the wave to help them. But when it comes strictly to efficiency, right, you don't necessarily want to go to that wave if they're already dealing with it. And it would be more efficient for you to do the second priority thing, which is the Sinners, because they can get the wave, you can get the Sinners, and that way your team generates more souls as a whole. Now, the hard part about this is you need to try to read your teammates' movements on the minimap. So if you look at the minimap, you see someone ziplining to a wave, maybe you don't need to go to that wave and you can instead farm camps, or boxes on the way there, or Sinners if there's anything available. I will say that at lower ranks, teammates can be very unpredictable, which makes this very hard. So if you feel like you can't predict your teammates, then it's difficult. I would always try to predict my teammates, and sometimes you're going to fail, and that's okay, but you'll probably get a better read on your teammates as you keep trying to predict them, and eventually you'll be able to predict your teammates pretty accurately, even if you're, an Archon or below. Now, efficiency also includes movement. Now, I'm going to be making a deeper movement guide in the coming weeks. For now, just make sure you use the jump pads and zip lines as much as possible to move around the map. Before we get any further in the video, I'd like to just do a quick intermission to talk about Death Slam Academy, which has been a project of mine that I've been doing with Poshi Pop for the last couple of months. If you guys would like to improve your Deadlock gameplay, you can consider joining. It is a paid community and it helps me pay the bills as well as do content. In this community, you can hope to find coaching VODs, you can find lessons, we have weekly events, and basically, I think it's just the place to be if you're trying to become a better Deadlock player. Now, don't want to pay for anything, then keep watching the rest of this video. Thank you so much. When it comes to pressure, which is the second pillar, this is usually what separates decent players from great players. Anyone can play 7 and hit the jungle, get the sinners, and clear the jungle and waves efficiently. What makes a good player stand out is how much pressure they're going to create on the map. To understand pressure, the simple way of describing it is simply making the enemy do things, right? If you made someone on the enemy team do something, you pressured them to do something. Pushing waves is the simplest example. If you push a wave, someone's going to have to respond. Therefore, you created pressure. You should always push waves as far as you possibly can. The way I teach players is what I call always go one more wave. Now, you shouldn't literally always go one more wave, but it's more the principle. After clearing a wave, ask yourself, can I go one more wave? Look on the minimap to see how far away the next wave is. Is it about to drop off the zipline? Is it risky? Did it just spawn? Making these constant aggressive wave pushes is going to teach you a lot about how players react to waves being pushed. So you'll learn like, hey, am I going to get jumped by 3 people? Is this wave actually safe? You're definitely going to die. I'm not going to lie to you. You will die doing this, but you will learn. And that's the most important thing. You shouldn't be concerned. If you want to be better at the mid game, you shouldn't be concerned about short-term results. You want to be concerned about learning the game and learning the fundamentals. And to do so, you have to make mistakes. Also, dying while pushing a wave is one of the best types of deaths in the game. Now, no deaths are, it's pretty rare that there's like good deaths. Ideally, you always want to try to live if you can. There's plenty of times where you die and it was necessary though. And dying while pushing a wave, I mean, you're not dropping unsecured souls unless you recently farmed the jungle. You're creating a problem for the enemy team to deal with. And most likely they sent at least 2 players to kill you, right? Which means that your team should have numbers advantage elsewhere on the map. Applying pressure also means asking yourself who you can fight and who you can't fight. If you're stuck in a side lane in a 1v1, ask yourself, can I fight this guy? Let's say you're Infernos versus Wraith and you have 2,000 more souls in the Wraith. Can you fight him? What if he just TPs away? But maybe you can force his TP and then he can't walk up to the wave again, right? It's kind of this whole idea of the skirmish. So if you're not sure whether you can fight the guy or not, try to take a small little skirmish, try to poke or, do a small engagement on them and see how it goes. Did you, take way more damage than you dealt? Was it favorable for you? Make sure before you do this that you always try to check items to see if they've got a specific item to counter you or how strong they are relative to you. For example, I don't know, if you're playing Wraith and you're dependent on using your TP to survive the engagement and you check their items and you see they have a slowing X, maybe you shouldn't fight that guy. As a rule of thumb, you're always going to want to try to fight after you hit a power spike. So if you're close to a power spike, you might want to wait. Now, a lot of people might ask, what is a power spike? Usually I define a power spike as buying an item that is 3,200 souls or above, or maxing an ability by unlocking its last upgrade. So getting the 5 AP upgrade on an ability. Lastly, you want to steal enemy resources if you are ahead. This means stealing their camps, sinners, boxes, anything you can. Part of applying pressure is trying to occupy space on their side of the map when you're ahead. If you're behind, applying pressure is hard, but usually mostly revolves around aggressively pushing waves and creating engagements in side lanes to try to pick off their players farming. Let's talk about objectives, the third pillar. When do you do the urn? What about walkers? What about mid-boss? I wish there was an easy answer, but the real answer is it depends. However, I can tell you what to think about to do these objectives, right? So what criteria do you need to think about in order to do the urn, the walkers, the mid-boss? Now, let's start with the urn. The urn is probably the most nuanced one because it can be in 3 different states. It can be a friendly comeback urn, which is indicated by green candles. It can be neutral, indicated by the absence of candles, or it can be an enemy comeback urn, indicated by red candles. If it's a friendly comeback urn, you should always try to pick it up right away, no exceptions. It is the best way to come back into the game, and it should be your #1 priority no matter what hero you're playing. I see this so often at lower ranks where a bunch of people just ignore the comeback urn when it is the single most efficient way to come back into the game. Do not ignore it if it is comeback urn in your favor. If it's a neutral urn, this is where it gets a little bit tricky. If your team has a lead of a few thousand souls, it's usually a good idea to try to pick it up and run it. However, there's all sorts of factors that can influence whether the urn will be good or not. Some of these are, for example, the wave states, like how pushed your waves are on the enemy side of the map. Numbers advantage, are any of the enemies dead? Are they 1 dead, 3 dead, 4 dead? Ult economy, how many good ults do you have versus how many good ults they have for the urn fight? and overall how much your team wants to fight. Now, the neutral urn, assuming that the enemy team isn't dead, is basically a force a team fight button. But the moment you pick up the neutral urn, your idea should be, hey, there's going to be a fight that's going to happen unless the enemy team is dead. That means that you should want to take this fight if you pick it up. Now, just ask yourself, are we strong right now? Do we want to fight? Are there players on my team that are particularly strong that are on the side of the deposit? For example, let's say you've got an Infernus that's having an incredible game and he's on the lane where the urn will be deposited and he's very strong. Then running the urn in those situations is pretty good because you're going to be playing in that area where Infernus already is, and he definitely wants to fight because he's really strong. Just some food for thought. I should add that at lower ranks, you can get away with just running the urn for free pretty often. So sometimes you might just be able to pick it up and run it. Once again, similarly to other things we talked about, you're going to run the urn and sometimes you're going to get light melee, the urn is going to drop, and then they'll get the urn and you'll be very sad about it. But that's all part of the learning experience, right? So just keep that in mind. Think about these factors. Think about, okay, do we want to fight right now, right? If it's a neutral urn, the main thing should be, do we want to fight or will we win the fight? And if the answer is yes, then you should run it. Now let's talk about if it's an enemy comeback urn. If it's an enemy comeback urn, you should run it if you have an overwhelming advantage. Kind of similarly to the neutral urn, if they're alive, they will fight you. So it's kind of a force a fight button as well. Now, if your team wants to fight because you have one of the advantages we talked about previously, like you're up a lot of souls or you have way more ults than them, then by all means, try to run it. Otherwise, you can grab it and hold on to it for a little bit to either prevent or delay the enemy team from getting the comeback urn. If you can't grab it in time and they manage to grab it right away because they watched this video and they know that it's the priority for them, you should try to trade the objective or contest the urn. You have to make the decision. Do we contest the urn or do we trade the urn for an objective? You contest the urn, that means that you think you're strong enough to fight them near one of their walkers usually. So it's a difficult fight to take. So you should only do it if you're very confident. If you're not very confident that you can fight them, then I would recommend you try to trade it for a walker if you can. So if there's a walker alive on the opposite side of the map from the urn deposit, then you should try to trade it for that walker. And it's usually the easiest play to get something while they're getting the urn. And you're not going to be on the winning side of that trade, but at least you're not going to, let them fully come back into the game as you're still getting something in exchange. Speaking of walkers, let's talk about them a little bit. Now, when do you push walkers? In my opinion, walkers are something that shouldn't be forced. I've seen so many games that are thrown by a team that has a 5 or 10,000 soul lead and is just repeatedly throwing themselves at the walkers, kind of feeding, and yeah, sure, they'll get a walker, but they'll die so many times in the process that all of a sudden their lead has diminished significantly. In a previous video, I've said that dying for walkers is worth it. This is still true, but there are some caveats I want to talk about. First of all, if you're ahead, deaths are worse than if the game is even or behind. This is due to two things: comeback mechanics and respawn timers. So the comeback mechanics make it so they get more money for, getting kills, and the respawn timers make it so that you are probably dead for longer if your net worth is higher than the average net worth of the enemy team. Now, bit of a convoluted way to go about it, but that is how the mechanic works. So dying for a walker when you're ahead is more risky. Now, dying for a walker when the game is even or when you're behind is usually good. However, I want to also add a little detail. If you lose one person for a walker, regardless of you're ahead or behind or even, it's usually fine. The problems occur when you lose two people. So if you lose two people for a walker and you're ahead, it's usually not very good. If it's an even game and you lose two people for a walker, it kind of depends on what time the game is at, because if the game's at like 25 minutes and you're both dead for 45 or 50 seconds, then it might give an opportunity for the enemy team to do mid boss, particularly if their waves are already good. However, if it's like 15 minutes and your respawn timers are not that long and the waves are bad, then even if you lose two people, they might not get mid boss, right? So that's one of the main factors, is ask yourself, if we both die, can they get mid boss? And if the answer is yes, then you really shouldn't die for the walker, because trading a walker for mid boss is a very, very bad play. Now, if you're behind, like let's say your team is losing and you die for a walker, that's usually great, because you're not going to be penalized by comeback mechanics. You're not going to be penalized by a longer respawn timer. And so, dying for a walker is usually fine. Now, of course, you don't want to lose three people. Losing two people, like I said, if they can get mid boss, it's still bad. But if they can't get mid boss, losing one or two people is. So if you can't force walkers, right, and dying for them can be good, but it's not always good. So when do you go for walkers? In my opinion, the best time to go for walkers is after getting kills, which is, I think, pretty obvious to most players. But there's also another situation, which is when every wave is pushed. So if you have all three of your waves that are pushed towards the enemy side and they're all crashing into the enemy walkers, that's a fantastic time to pressure walkers, because the enemy team has to split up. Otherwise, they will be guaranteed to lose one of their walkers. If they don't split up in like a 2-2-2 fashion, then they might lose one of their walkers. If they concentrate their players on one walker, then they'll probably lose another walker, right? And even though you might lose some players in the process, since all of your waves are pushed, you're not really risking a lot, because it's going to be very difficult for them to go mid boss because all the waves are pushed, right? Meaning they'll have to deal with those waves. waves. In that situation, if you ever see all of your waves are pushed, it's a good time to pressure a walker. Something I want to add, you don't necessarily need to kill the walker, right? Just doing, for example, half of the walker's health can be very, very valuable, and then backing up. You don't need to kill the walker in one shot. It's okay to kill the walker in a few pushes. And if a walker is half HP, it's going to be way easier to kill the walker later. If you ever get one kill and you get a small opening that might only be 10 or 15 seconds, that might be enough to kill that walker because it was half HP from a previous push that you did. Now, we talked a lot about mid boss, so let's talk about when you should do mid boss, right? Because I just said, hey, if you died the walker, they might do mid boss. Mid boss, unfortunately, for the purposes of this video, is pretty nuanced. So sometimes you can force mid boss literally in a 6v6. Other times you might need 3 or even more kills before you can do mid boss. Before you consider mid boss, the most important thing to talk about is how good the enemy team is at contesting mid boss. Do they have AoE abilities like Page Ultimate, Dynamo Ultimate, Abrams Charge, etc., or even Graves, or heroes that are particularly good in the pit? If so, are those heroes available, or are their abilities available, right? Do they have ultimate? Sometimes you might see, okay, they have that hero, but I see that hero completely on the opposite side of the map. If we rush mid boss right now, we might be able to get it. This is one of the most important things, because if you go for a mid boss and they have those abilities and they manage to make it in time by the time you kill mid boss, it can basically be a coin flip on the rejuvenator, and it can depend on a lot of things. Coin flipping the rejuvenator can be fine in certain situations where you have to make a risky play because you're behind and the game hasn't been going well for you, and you want to try to make a play that's going to get you guys back in the game. But in most situations, I wouldn't recommend that you go with this approach. So you want to identify a time where mid boss can be done and they either can't get there to contest in time, or if they come to contest, you believe your team is stronger in the mid boss pit and will win the fight. So either you have more ultimates, your ultimates are better for mid boss, you have a way to secure the crystal that's very reliable, like a Yamato, for example, that can go invulnerable in the pit, dodge a bunch of abilities, as well as have the unstoppable effect. Or you've got, some big heroes that really, really like fighting there, like a Victor, like a Graves, etc. One thing that I'll say is the first mid boss should almost always be done before all 3 walkers are killed, right? So you never want to, there's almost never a situation in which you'll have all 3 walkers killed and then you do the first mid boss. You should usually do it after you get 1 or 2 walkers, and sometimes you can even do it before you get any walkers, depending on the game. Now that we talked about the major objectives, as well as the general concepts of the mid game, how do you reconcile these ideas with the hero that you are playing? So the way that I like to think about it is these principles apply to everyone, right? The objectives matter to everyone. Pillars of macro, efficiency, pressure, and objectives, that matters to everyone. But depending on your role, you might, it's kind of like a modifier on these things. So every Deadlock hero has strengths and weaknesses, and I can't cover all of them, but there are some general archetypes in Deadlock, which is what I'll focus on. Now, for the purposes of this video, I've chosen 5 archetypes, but you could make more, you could make less, kind of depends. I think my 5 archetypes include the most amount of heroes, but there's always going to be heroes that, don't really fit in these archetypes or are part of multiple archetypes. So you're gonna have to take this information and interpret it a little bit on your side. The 5 archetypes I've chosen are carry heroes, support heroes, frontline heroes, pick heroes, and nukers is the last one that I've chosen. So carry heroes are like 7 or Wraith. They scale great with a lot of items and souls. They're stronger later in the game. They can farm the jungle effectively. Their primary role in the mid game is to be as efficient as possible, get as much farm as possible, and you want to pressure side lanes. They're having a good game. They might be able to get a solo walker, which can massively boost their net worth and lead them to snowballing, right? So they're not necessarily going to be showing up to a ton of fights early. They're going to be focusing on getting their net worth good, getting their items, pressuring side lanes, constantly pushing. And if there's ever a team fight happening elsewhere, their primary thing that they'll look at is to try to push a walker. Now, support heroes are heroes like Paige, Rem, or Kelvin, for example. They usually don't need as many souls or to have impact, and they're more utility focused. Their primary objective is to either keep their team alive or disable the enemy team so they can't fight very well. This can be done through abilities or items, for example, like Cursed Relic, Rescue Beam, Divine Barrier, and many others. Their primary role in the mid game is to catch any wave that the rest of their team can't, but more importantly, it's also to play around the heroes that are strong on their team. It can enable them to have a better game. If you're a support player, identify who is having a good game on your team and try to help them out as much as possible. Frontline heroes are heroes like Abrams, Billy, and Yamato. Now, they excel at getting in the fights, creating chaos and space by tanking enemy damage and abilities. In the mid game, these heroes usually want to be involved in engagements, and some of them can create those engagements. If you're a frontliner, you want to make sure that you're playing aggressively and trying to create opportunities for your team to take good fights. However, make sure you're not taking fights alone too often, as most of these heroes don't necessarily excel in 1v1 fights. Now, some of them can for sure, but it'll be better off if you've got someone out to help you, like a support, for example. Big heroes are heroes like Paradox and Holiday. These heroes usually have abilities that allow them to move quickly around the map, as well as abilities that allow them to catch someone out of position, like Paradox Swap or Holiday Lasso. Their primary role in the mid game is to catch out players and constantly try to create opportunities for their team to get kills. If you're playing a pick hero, you want to identify the enemy heroes that are the easiest to kills and look for those opportunities. Avoid showing yourself as much as possible. The less the enemy team knows where you are, the better your ganks will be. I would highly recommend as well that you try to look on side lanes, as people on side lanes tend to be not as cautious as they should be, and a lot of the time there's going to be a Wraith or an Infernus or a Mirage that just gets a little bit, cocky, and then they get slowing hex. You can swap them and they die pretty easily. On top of that, those targets are usually worth more and have longer respawn timers. By worth more, I mean they have more souls, so them being dead is better for your team than somebody that is poorer being dead. Not necessarily that they'll give you more souls for killing them, although sometimes they have unsecured souls back that they drop. Nukers are heroes like Pocket, Lash, or Mina. These heroes usually have large amounts of burst damage that can eliminate targets. Ideally, nukers want to play with frontline or pick heroes that can create a favorable engagement for them, which they can follow up on efficiently. For example, Paradox Swaps into an Abrams charge, into a Lash ground strike, into a Mina ultimate, or just Mina bursting the player down, things like that. You want to identify any hero on your team that you want to play around and try to keep their positioning in mind. Doesn't mean you should follow them around, but if you see them initiating a fight, you want to be their +1 so that you can clean up whoever they create the engagement around. Now, these heroes are usually good at clearing tier 2 jungle camps due to the burst nature of their kit, meaning they can very often just one-shot a jungle camp. So try to clearing those as often as possible. Earlier, I discussed power spikes a little bit, but I'd like to touch just a little more on it. When you hit a power spike, previously described as maxing an ability or buying an item that is 3,200 or more souls, you should always be willing to take a decent fight. Usually a power spike is the strongest that you'll be for the next 2 minutes. Why? Because on average, you'll make less than 1,600 souls per minute, meaning that you won't get another item or ability upgrade of similar strength for at least 2 minutes. Very often, it's going to be 3 or more. Even if you're behind or ahead, in either scenario, this is your very best time to look for an engagement. It doesn't mean that you need to fight, but you should be very interested in fighting. The last principle I want to discuss is the game state. Now, in general, when you're ahead, you want to steal enemy resources and play on their side of the map if you're an aggressive hero. If you're behind, you want to secure your own resources and look for a comeback earn. Most players understand this, but don't apply it. Why? Because they're not paying attention to the game state. Every time you're farming in the jungle, I want you to look at the top of your screen and look at 2 things: souls and the clock. Which team is winning? By how much are they winning? When is the next key objective, like earn or bridge buffs? This is extremely important because it should guide your decisions. Ideally, you also want to use this time to identify who's strong and weak on both teams and do a quick item check. This is more advanced and will come to you with time. This game has tons of options in the mid game, and I can't possibly convey all of them in a video unless I wanted this video to be 2 hours long. If you remember anything from today, I want it to be that combining efficiency, pressure, and objectives is key to becoming a better Deadlock player. Start asking yourself questions about how you can be more efficient. Was going to that lane really better than hitting the centers or farming these camps? Questions like these create top players. For example, of how you should ask these questions, watch my coaching session with Quinn, one of the best Dota players in the world. Link in the description. Thanks for watching. Late game guide coming soon, and I hope you have an amazing day.